Good morning, how are we doing? Today is the 6th of December. It's the sixth and final part of this 6-part series on top 10 things to do with your Christmas veg. And today we're going to be looking at swedes, or known to much of the world as rutabaga. Okay, basically, and if you guys don't know what that is, basically it's a big yellow turnip. It's a root vegetable. Purple on the top, yellow flesh, the rest of it's all yellow. Some people love it, some people can't stand it. But that's like any kind of veg. Anybody, you know, you do love it or you do not, one or the other. But I do encourage you to try it and find a way, because honestly it's a very cheap vegetable. It's normally quite cheap year round. So, and especially this year they're going to be price capping the veg here in the UK at certain supermarkets, and you can pick up a really good decently sized one about this for 19p. Now one that size is probably going to feed 4 people quite happily. Honestly, it will feed 4 people happily. So for 19p, you know, it's a bargain, shall we say. We're going to look at the top 10 ways to be able to preserve or store our swedes, because if you're anything like us, we're going to buy a couple of extra just to keep, because they are that cheap, let's be honest. And I think we've worked out that we're going to get 5. That will be 95 pence worth. That's enough for us. That'll keep us going if we use some of these preserving methods. Okay, now if you want to keep them fresh, this is by far the cheapest way of keeping your swedes. All right, sometimes they come in plastic. Now if yours have come in plastic rather than just left open, please do take that plastic off. A swede is a living, breathing plant, and it will create condensation underneath that plastic. It will sit in it and rot, and you'll end up with a mushy, horrible mess in probably about week and a half, 2 weeks. It's not nice. Not nice at all. No. Let's not do that. What you can do though is you can keep them in a cool, damp place, like the shed. You can keep them in the shed. You can keep them happily there for months, as long as it's dark, it's a little bit damp, not too damp. We don't want it dripping. Okay, I'm not talking about the dungeons or the oubliette. I'm talking about the back shed or your root cellar, or if you're lucky enough to have a basement, put them in the basement. Simple, yeah? But they do need the dark, otherwise they're going to start sprouting, and as soon as they start sprouting their tops, they're going to start going soggy, and we don't want that. You can, if you don't have a fully dark situation, you can keep them in a bucket with damp sand, like you would your carrots, like you would your parsnips. You could do the same with your swedes, which is really good if you grow your own, because you want to keep them nice and just damp. Damp is enough. We're not talking about sodden, flooded, anything like that. Just a bit of damp sand, you're fine. Same with the sawdust. You can do the same with the sawdust. So those are ways that you can keep them fresh. If you don't have that facility, I would suggest keeping them in the fridge. Now if you're going to keep them in the fridge, just pop them in pop them in the veg crisper, and as long as they've got like a bit of kitchen towel, a little bit of damp tea towel under there, clean tea towel, people, they should keep for weeks and weeks and weeks, like really weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Okay, just make sure to rotate the kitchen towel and the tea towels out probably weekly, just to make sure that if there are any nasties, they're not going to stay there. Okay, or if they have been sweating a lot, then you can get rid of that, because there'll be too much water in it. So the first proper preserving method we're going to look at is freezing. Now you can freeze swede. Swede is able to be frozen, but you do need to peel and blanch it first. The peels aren't that attractive if you freeze them, and they will freeze and turn into a different texture to the inside of that vegetables, and we don't want that either, because ew. But keep your peels, turn them into soup later on, don't waste them, okay? Don't waste them, you know. But do blanch your swede, pop it in to boil it, and to blanch it you pop it into boiling water for 1 or 2 minutes. If you're doing small dice, don't do that. Okay, 30 seconds, a minute, that's enough. And then dump them in an ice water bath to stop the cooking process so they don't turn to mush, because we don't want that either. Then you pat them dry with a tea towel, or some kitchen roll, whatever you've got that's clean, and pop them on baking trays. If you've got pieces, you could do sticks, you could do slices, you could do dice, you could do whatever you want. So you want a single layer on a baking sheet in the freezer until that's frozen, and then put it in your baggies and containers. That way they're freezing individually, and when you put your hand in the bag or the container, you can bring out what you need and not the whole lot, because otherwise it will lump together, and we don't want that. No, you don't. You really, really don't want that. So next we're going to look at dehydrating swede. Can you do it? Yes, you can. Like any root vegetable, it can be dehydrated, and you can do it as slices, as sticks, as dice, as mash without the dairy. Okay. What I will say is you will need to blanch them first before you put them in the dehydrator, otherwise they can go a bit funky. Yeah, they don't dry so well if you haven't blanched them first. My personal preference is to blanch them first. There are people who don't blanch them first and just put the pieces in the thing, but my personal preference is always blanch it off a bit first and then stick it in the dehydrator, and you'll end up with a better texture product at the end. Dehydrated swede is easy enough to chuck into casseroles and soups and all that kind of thing later in the year. Doesn't take up room in the freezer, doesn't take up room, you know, in other places where you may not want it, and because it's dehydrated, takes up a lot less room than other preserving methods that may take up 6 or 7 jars. You may only need 1 or 2. So it's a very good way of doing that. The other way you can keep them is in vacuum sealed bags, or in like Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers in them, so that you can keep them for a bit longer term. Not a problem at all. You know, have 1 jar out, 1 in a tote, so you can line them up like files in a filing cabinet in a tote, stick it under the bed. Perfect. Next we're going to look at water bathing swede rutabaga. Now I'm aware that in the US this isn't a done thing. That's fine. There are sections of your communities that do it, but you know, it's not the suggested way of doing things. But I don't live over there, and I live here, and I live in Australia sometimes, and you know, the rest of the world we water bath. And to water bath swede, you want to add a tablespoon of vinegar or lemon juice to the jar, teaspoon of salt, and it will be water bathed for 2 hours. Okay, it's that simple. Is it something I would do? I have done it. Was I pleased with the result? It wasn't my bestest favourite, but I was able to use it in soups and casseroles and stuff like that. In stews, I was able to roast them off, which gave them a little bit of a better texture afterwards. And I was able to mash them up with other vegetables and make, you know, add to the meal. So I personally, it's probably not my go-to preservation method, but if I had gluts of them, like if I was growing them myself and I had like 20-30 of them, I would probably take 5 aside and water bath them in, so that I've got them in the cupboard just in case. That's just me. I'm just saying, that's just me. Okay, but you do you, boo. This brings us on to pressure canning. As we are very aware by now, I don't do that. It's not my thing, it's not my bag, it's far too expensive to set up. I don't have that sort of money, and I've had an accident. If you want to hear about that accident, you're going to have to go back to the 10 things to do with potatoes video. However, it's very big in the States, it's very big in Canada, and there are small factions of people who are doing it over here and in Australia and around the world. Very, very small factions of people compared to everybody else. So, what I will say is this. In the companion blog that goes with this video, there will be links to people who have pressure canned swede or rutabaga. Okay? Go down to the description below and check out that link to the blog. Alright? Because everything that you hear in here will be there. There will also be additional links to people and recipes that you may find very useful when it comes to preserving these vegetables. Do I have any blogs or videos on any of this myself? No, I don't. Because I'm waiting till the 18th to get my veg. So, you know, and then I'll have videos. But not till next year, because I'm taking the rest of the year off after we've done all this, okay? So next we're going to look at pickling. Now, pickling swede is a done thing. There are several ways of doing it. It's actually quite yummy. It's not bad, you know. It really, really isn't bad. And again, it's something different to have on your shelves that you wouldn't normally have. And even if you're not sure about it, make one jar. Make one jar. And then try it. And if you like it, you have a new thing you can make and a new thing to put on your pantry shelf. If you don't like it, you haven't made 30 of them, so it's a win, right? Okay, so try it out. Pickling is a really easy and simple and cheap method of preserving. The vinegar does the work, the acid does the work, the alkali does the work. If it's alcohol, alcohol does the work of preserving the food. So you don't have to do any pressure canning or, you know, water bathing or any of that. You just pour the ingredients together, leave them in a dark cupboard, let them do their thing, and in a few weeks you have something really, really yummy. Be aware though, the smaller you make your pieces, the quicker it is to pickle. So if you want an overnight pickle, you want to shave the swede or make it into matchsticks or into micro dice, and then it will be done for the next day. Would I do that? In a pinch, but I'd only make a small amount of it. Normally I'd make sort of chip-sized pieces or larger diced pieces if I was going to pickle. Sometimes I'll do, you know, circle slices that are a little smaller than the head of the jar rim, okay, so that they can sit quite happily in there, lined up. Not a problem. It all works really, really well. But try it out, okay? Try it out. It's nothing going to hurt you. It's just vinegar and turnip at the end of the day, let's be fair. Fermented. Now, I think by now everybody knows I'm a little bit of a fermentation fan. I love my fermented pickled veg. I really, really do. Now, swede is one of these things that actually, if you can't do cabbage sauerkraut or don't like it, you can actually make a sauerkraut out of swede. And it is very good. Can I just say, oh my God. Brilliant. Whoever came up with that needs all of the praise, all of it, because it is so, so good. So yeah, fermented is a great way to go. It's really good for gut health. It's so good. All that lactobacillus gut bacteria, good gut bacteria that you're pounding into your body, it can only work for your own good, because if your digestive system's working properly, then the rest of your body is going to be functioning much better. Side dishes. Now, I did a Google search There's almost a million. Almost a million. We can't get through that in our lifetime. Pick one. Pick 5. Pick however many you want. But get them pre-made. I mean, like, seriously, if you've got room in your freezer, the more food you have in your freezer, the better your freezer works. Because your freezer works, like, if you have one thing in your freezer, all of that air is going to waste. And if the freezer goes down, everything, that one thing is more likely to defrost. If you have a freezer that is jam-packed to the gunnels, right up to the top, if it goes down, you are less likely to lose everything in the freezer because all of the ice has a compound effect on itself. The more ice you have packed around itself, the less is going to freeze, and the only things you'll lose are the stuff that's on the top. Probably. Depending on how long it's been switched off for. You know? But yeah, chest freezers, that's the best way to go. But, you know, obviously, if you can't, you can't. I mean, we have a little one. We have a very, very small one. It's only 2 foot by 2 foot square. And I keep that for meals, predominantly for meals. Because for us, having pre-made meals in the house is a lot easier to deal with. Especially on days where I can't cook. We can just pull them out, stick them in the oven, and off we go. Now, I have a couple of favourites when it comes down to Swede side dishes. One is mashed. It's simple, mashed with butter. Yum. Tanny loves it. Mashed with carrot and butter. And a little bit of mint sauce or a little bit of mint. Just to give it a boost. My mum used to serve it steamed or boiled, and she would mix butter and mint with it. The mint made a difference. It really, really did, because it helped to break out the bitterness that you can sometimes get with that kind of vegetable. And it made it more palatable. Honestly, it really did. For a young kid, it made it a lot better. But you can make chips with it, you can roast them, you can steam them, boil them, mash them. Whatever you can think of. If you can do it to a potato, you can probably do it to a swede. I'm just saying. Soup. Swede soup. Like any root vegetable, it can be souped. Like any vegetable, it can be made into soup. You just, you know, you would make up your normal soup. And there are millions. Millions. I was looking this morning, and there's this really nice one that I want to try, which is red lentil and swede. And I'm just thinking, that is so simple. But swede has a very subtle yellow colour. The red lentil's a little bit more orange, yeah? So you have that really nice sort of subtle yellow, orangey, saffron-y colour. You know, that you don't have to add the saffron to if you don't want to. But honestly, it's got that beautiful colour to it, which in the depths of winter is really inviting. It makes you feel cosy, and it gives you that vibrance of something that, quite frankly, a lot of us need a bit more colour when it comes down to the dead of winter, because it's not on the branches of the trees anymore, you know? And it's not out there, and people tend to wear muted clothing and muted colours and all of that kind of thing. Where in reality, having something with a bit of colour in it that's warm and cosy and makes you feel good and warms you from the inside out can't be bad. Now, most soups can be frozen, water buffed, pressure canned, however you want. And if you're really clever, and I mean you got to be really clever, and you've got to have one, you can dehydrate it. You can. But if you are dehydrating a soup, I must tell you not to put dairy in it. Don't put any dairy in it. If you're going to do that way, make sure you've got no dairy in it. If you are going to do that kind of thing, because it goes rancid and it won't hold for longer than about 6 to 8 weeks in a container. Honestly, I wouldn't do it. It's not worth the hassle, frankly. But it's an option, and if that's the option you want to go with, that's cool. Just leave the dairy out. And my last one, one of the favourite things that I love to do with root vegetables is make crisps or potato chips out of them, which in this case would be sweet chips, like we did with the carrots and the parsnips and the potatoes and everything. You can add these to the list of vegetables that you can make some really yummy crisps out of. Instead of buying the big packets at the stores, you've already got them. Just slice them really thin, get them all, like you can use a mandolin, you can do any of that. I mean, like I've used the spiralizer, you know, the thing that makes the little ribbons and things, or even get a veg peeler. That gives you nice thin ones. Just make sure that they're all cooked to crispy crisp, and make a big bowl out of a whole heap of different veg. I mean, like if you've got bits of this and that are just bombing around the fridge, it's a great way to use them up. They will keep in a container, an airtight container, for up to about 2 weeks, as long as they're drained off properly of all the fat. You can do them in the oven if that's what you want. You can do them in the air fryer if that's what you want. You know, whatever works for you. Okay, but you can make them and they're great. And you really, really should. You really should. Because if you've got a whole heap of different ones in a bowl, it just makes life a little bit more interesting. Especially if you're trying to be a little bit better with your eating habits and being a bit more healthy. If you're able to make them either in the air fryer or the dehydrator or in the oven, you know, you don't need to use any fat for any of those. But it's entirely up to you what you can afford to do and how much electric you can afford to be running at any one time. Those are my top 10 preserving and storing methods for Swedes / rutabagas. Any of the things that you've seen in this video, just give it a go. Whatever works for you, you know. Take into account your storage space, take into account what you can afford on the electric and gas. Choose your own preserving method based on what you can afford, and that has to be to do with storage, to do with extra ingredients, to do with, you know, your utilities, and take it all into account. Whatever you choose to do in the end is entirely up to you. And I just really hope that this little series of videos has really helped out some people, even if it's just one of you who's got some ideas, you know, because they've got £6 and they can go and buy £1 worth of each of these vegetables that we've discussed this week, and then being able to put some aside for their families for later on. It all makes sense, and a lot of the things that we've talked about would be sold as artisanal product, which means that you're going to get a little jar like this for anywhere between £4 and £12. Not kidding. Not kidding. Let's be honest. It's the kind of stuff that's sold in posh delis. So, you know, make it for yourself. You don't have to spend that money then. You know, you've already got it in the cupboard, and it fills your pantry pretty quick with making your own things like this. And it's limited work. A lot of it is very limited work. And it's stuff you can do in front of the TV. If you feel like you've only got, like, you know, an hour a day to spend on doing anything of this, just stick the TV on, put a movie on and do it while you're doing that. If you're prepping veg, you know, do it that way. It just makes so much sense. And you don't have to worry about standing around in the kitchen, being away from the kids or doing any of that. Get the kids involved. Have some fun. Enjoy it. And make your life a little bit simpler. And let's not, you know, make waste of what we get this year. Have a really awesome rest of your day, my lovelies. I will be back tomorrow when we're going to be starting to look at some of the shop bought offerings that are out there through the supermarkets, and we're going to be making them ourselves for either a fraction of the cost, or using that money that is available that you buy 6 or 8 little things in and making 5 to 10 times as many for the same amount. in less time probably than you having to go and fight your way to the supermarket. I mean, you know, win-win, right? I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a really awesome rest of your day. I love you guys heaps. Mwah!